Raptors Weekly for the week of March the 21st. He's been away for a few months, traveling the earth, searching for the answers to the meaning of life, the universe, and all that's in between. We welcome an old name, but a new man. It's Andrew Thompson.
I am back. I didn't find any existential answers, but who cares? The Raptors are great now.
42. 42 is the answer to life.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Did you ever read that book?
Yeah, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah. Disappointing movie, but a pretty good book.
Yeah, pretty good book. Is it 42 or 7 or something like that?
It's 42. It's 42.
42. All right.
In fact, if you actually type that in Google, like what is the meaning of life and everything, it actually comes back with the number 42 as a joke.
So there you go. Yeah, if you guys learn nothing more from this podcast, it's that 42 is the meaning of life, and never Google Fournier.
Or Santorum. That was the other Googling term of last year.
Yeah.
So you've been away for a couple of months since you went away. A lot of things have happened in Raptorland. Donald Trump is a thing now. Maybe you've come back to a bit of a surprise there. But let's talk Raptors, man. When you left, this was a team which was not in disarray, but definitely finding itself on what it what its strengths or what its weaknesses were. People were still questioning, DeMar DeRozan, should we extend him? What's going on there? Now that you come back 2.5 months later, talk to me about the shift in your experience in before, as in what you saw when you left, and now that you're here.
Sure. So I wrote an article on RR before I left. It was an oddly personal article just about how I was planning on leaving the team and the NBA season, and how that was a little weird for me, but I was going to leave technology behind and just go away for 2 months, and I did that. And so I was in Southeast Asia from January about 13th until March 6th. So just to give some context to that, when I left, the Raptors had in no way separated themselves from the Washington Wizards, from the Miami Heat, from the Atlanta Hawks, from anyone in the East. This was a team that was very much indifferent from the 7th place team in the Eastern Conference as they were from the 2nd place team. And I kind of saw things intermittently online. I didn't see any game footage, so I saw nothing while I was gone. But I would intermittently read things on Twitter or an article here and there, or something that was just pumping up the Raptors. And that was you have to understand, as a Raptors fan who has left the team and reads about them as they're gone, I have never once in my life heard national and international media just give the Raptors love in my absence. I stopped watching the team a little bit during the middle of the Chris Bosh era, and I assure you that was not how the international media treated this team. So from afar, this is a team that clearly separated themselves from everyone except for Cleveland in the Eastern Conference. And starting to watch this team was a very interesting experience. When I left, DeMar was someone that we were unsure of whether or not we should sign. People were frantically in conniptions about whether or not Patrick Patterson was someone who was going to be a decent contract this year, let alone a reasonable player. I come home to a team where DeMar is, at least from what I've seen, very worthy of a near max contract, and Patrick Patterson is someone who has unquestionably put himself together and is grossly underpaid and possibly the 3rd most important player on this team. Am I wrong?
And your Terrence Ross stock, which you didn't sell, is valued pretty high right now.
Yes. Give me all of the rewards. I was the one Raptors fan or writer who at no point panicked about Terrence Ross. I was like, he's got this, guys. He just needs confidence. He'll turn it around. He's succeeded beyond my wildest dreams. Is it just me, or does Terrence Ross drive to the basket? Is Terrence Ross aware of where teammates are on the floor? And does Terrence Ross just fire up jumpers from beyond 3 with no shit's given?
That's a new thing over the last 3 weeks. His driving, where he actually had I forget which team it was against, but he had some scores in crunch time while driving and like executing basically sky hooks at one point. It was something surreal. But going back to your point about the media coverage, and it's not just the media coverage that the Raptors have had before, where it's hey, that team's kind of doing well. Isn't that kind of cute? The Raptors they're not that shitty anymore. They're on a bit of a run now. We're being talked about in terms of a serious contender in the East, and record wise, we're 1 game back of the Cavaliers, who have been struggling a little bit. So it's not even – you could actually make an argument that we potentially could be not favored by the by the bookies in a series against the Cavaliers, but in terms of record, we've beaten them twice this year, lost
Yeah.
one, are one game behind them. At this point, and DeMarre Carroll, who's supposed to be our marquee free agent signing, hasn't played a game in like months, probably
No.
before you even left. And you add that together, and you're like, there. This is the first time you're heading into the off season and or into the postseason, and it almost doesn't matter who we play because we feel confident that we're going to win our series.
It's not like you have to realize that since 2007, the only real team that the North American media has actually paid attention to as a genuine possible contender to the Cavaliers, or is even as a team that has been in their class, was the peak Derrick Rose and Joakim Noah, Tom Thibodeau Bulls, who were like an underappreciatedly great team. That's the only team in the last almost 10 years that the North American media has actually said maybe this team can challenge LeBron's team in the East. And I don't necessarily think the Raptors are on that level, but they're the first team in several years to actually be mentioned as a team that is like, well, I guess you got to mention the Raptors as someone who could, I guess, contend for the East compared to LeBron. Like that's who saw that coming?
I think the chemistry that and Dwayne Casey I think deserves a lot of credit here
For sure.
for putting this team
Yeah.
together the way he has.
We were,
And I think the one thing you'll notice, Andrew, is that nobody is really complaining about like, oh, JV doesn't play the fourth quarter, or he should be playing more, this guy should be playing less. It's almost like he's found this blend where he's kept his superstars happy, he's kept his role players happy, and they're all playing. James Johnson is playing, Ross is playing, JV's playing. They're playing the fourth quarter. They all like he's found this like bench lineup with Lowry and like four other guys, which just works in the second quarter. There are no glaring issues with the Raptors that you look at. Hey, could we fix that? The only thing that kind of jumps out is their post All-Star break defense, which actually is still pretty good in crunch time. But overall, it's taken a bit of a dive post All-Star break. But other than that, there's the other thing is that the assist numbers are still fairly low. But it's not that. It's not ball hogging assist. Like it's not low because the team is ball hogging. It just happens to be low because DeMar DeRozan tends to finish a lot of our plays, and a lot of his scores aren't really assisted. So even despite all that, you can't really point to one particular area and say that's a problem for the Raptors, which they have to fix immediately.
yeah, like it's the team has been a little bit helter skelter to watch the last little while. Like you watch like the Bucks game on, I think it's the Bucks game on Tuesday where DeMar did not play. Am I right on that?
Yeah. Rest.
Yeah. So that game they had was like 27 assists and the ball movement was like unreal, like just great, unlike any Raptors team you've seen play in recent years. And then you have the Pacers game 2 days later where they had like 11 or 12 assists in the entire game, and it's like it's a little back and forth. They win both games. They do it differently. And I think the moral of the story is since the All-Star break, or at least what I've seen since the All-Star break, because I can't pretend to have watched a lot of games in February, so maybe I'm generalizing, but whatever, is that this team finds a way to win however they decide to play in that current game. And the collective will to win and the collective ability to step up and have 8 or 9 different guys that play with confidence and desire on a nightly basis is kind of overcoming whether or not they're playing intelligently defensively or whether they're playing cohesively as a team or whether they're just like, like screw it. Like look, all we've got tonight is Kyle and maybe a couple guys from deep and we're going to make it happen. Or we are playing like absolute garbage from D, but DeMar is going to shoot 21 free throws tonight. Like since I've come home, what I've seen is a team that desires to win in different ways almost every night, and that is something very impressive.
And it's also the contribution of the role players here. I mean,
Sure.
no matter what button he presses, it seems to work. Like Norman Powell is starting these days off and on, and if his shot's not going, his defense is still there. I mean, tonight against the Magic, you saw him play 23 minutes and contribute. Bismack Biyombo just has been huge in JV's rest/injury absence. And Corey Joseph has been Corey Joseph. I mean, I don't think anybody's now talking about whether the Corey Joseph contract in the summer was overpriced. Remember that bullshit when he got paid $7 million and it was like, it might be too much money. It's just nobody even talks about it now.
Yeah. And the context there was like either it's too much money or it's not too much money, but not because Corey Joseph is great. It's because you don't understand how the new salary cap works. Like
Yeah.
no one was like, no, this is a really, really, really good signing.
Yeah, and even Luis Scola, who's been much maligned defensively, like he's been playing well against the Magic. He had 20 points against the Celtics. He had a big first quarter. Like my theory with Scola is that he knows that the iron is hot in the first quarter for him. When the rest of the 9 guys, 4 on his team, 5 on the are still kind of getting used to the game, just kind of waking up, getting ready. Scola's like, now's where I strike. Everybody's still waking up, but I gotta go be 100%. I'll get my points in the first quarter, and he always seems to catch people by surprise. And what gets me is that he gets a lot of his points in that first half on the break. It's not like they're throwing him the ball on the block and he's scoring. He's like running, and Lowry's finding him for like 6-7 points in the first quarter.
So this is something that I wanted to bring up is that so watching Scola, like how many baskets he gets in the fast break, especially with March Madness on, where like so like if you're someone who really watches the NBA, watching the March Madness tournament is fascinating because how many shots that you just assume are going to go in based on watching NBA basketball. When you watch March Madness, or like there is no fast break layup that is a guaranteed basket in March Madness. And you watch Scola, and that dude is slow, and that dude does not dunk in the fast break regardless of height. But what he always does is he finishes that layup, whether or not he's guarded, and he'll get to the line sometimes too, but like he just knows how to get a layup in the fast break. And maybe that's not something you should get pat on the back on, but once I've seen this last weekend of college basketball, I feel like that's something he deserves credit for, which is even when someone is challenging his shot, he just knows how to fundamentally drop those points in. And in preparation for this podcast, one of the things that I did, because I missed so much basketball and felt a little insecure about that and talking about it, is listen to some of the podcasts we did at the start of the year. And I've realized that, like, Scola and Biyombo aren't the two most important guys to this team by any stretch of the imagination. But holy crap, based on what they're getting paid this year, have they been giant wins for Masai Ujiri. And as far as giving credit where credit's due goes as well, you, Will, and I were, like, our endorsement of Casey coming into this year was somewhere in between I don't think so and I guess. And I think the credit needs to go in a couple of different directions. It's one, the directions that we were critical of Casey in, he deserves credit for improving. The way he has played the bench as far as giving guys minutes and giving them trust and showing confidence in guys like Ross and Johnson, he's grown that way. And he's also grown in the way that he has split the bench minutes up between having either Lowry or DeRozan on the floor with those guys so much more often and having more of a cohesive offense with them that wasn't just reliant on one bench scorer. I think Ujiri and the front office deserves a lot of credit for bringing in the assistants they did to sort of improve Casey and the way that he's coached the team with Andy North and not Andy North. Jesus, what's the name?
He's got Rex Kalamian and somebody else there.
Yeah. Anyways, I'm butchering the name of his assistant coaches, and I just realized that I don't know them, so I'm gonna just assume that you guys know what I'm talking about too, because I don't have notes. But the assistant coaches have really improved the team in ways that clearly make up for Casey's shortfalls in the past, and that's really great team management. And I think that Casey deserves credit in ways that we weren't willing to give it to him for the value of continuity and the value of the work ethic that he had brought to this team and the idea of focusing on learning certain things. And the team has grown in big ways, in ways that they had grown subtly in the past, specifically on defense. And you can just see the way that guys have improved and made leaps based on just giving a shit and pounding the rock in ways that that's always been his mantra. And yeah, like you, Will, and I were wrong. Like it was clearly the right choice to keep Casey.
I'll say that it doesn't really matter what I mean. Because that's my next point of this podcast. Actually, is we'll get to. But before we start going in that direction, Jason Thompson too is a pickup that he made a couple of weeks ago and to replace Anthony Bennett. And he's been productive. I mean, he's coming in, and every time I see him, he's getting a rebound here. He's hitting a shot. He's covering on defense. It's been a productive pickup, and I can see this guy being a matchup or situational player come the postseason.
Yeah, he can actually play, and Bennett couldn't. And just on his face, like the most we got from Bennett was like reading Blake's Twitter and being like, "Oh, Bennett was recalled with the other guys up from 905. Maybe he'll get minutes." And like he won't. But that was literally it. Like the most relevant part of Anthony Bennett's season this last year was just being mentioned in Blake Murphy's Twitter, and like that is not a high point for an NBA player. And I wish him the best, but he like for whatever reason it's not there.
Yeah, and at this point in the season, man, I'm just ready to just end the regular season and move on to the playoffs and see how things go there. We're now 60 games in. Like to win 60 games, we have to go 12-1. Obviously, it's unlikely to do that, but 55 could be a good target. We got 13 games left, basically. Are you looking at anything for these 13 games and trying to extract meaning out of them, or have we learned what we need to learn from this team at this point?
I think we've learned what we need to learn. I think I would like to see just maintain health and continue to improve defensively. Like as we talked about, like from the All-Star break until the start of March, this team was 25th or 26th in defense, and like that's a problem. And since the start of March, they've been notably better. And I would like to see that continue to improve, especially as they incorporate guys like Thompson and account for injuries, and the rotation changes a little bit, just like as that reflects a better team understanding of where they need to be defensively and how they need to play, and just being very, very disciplined. I think if we can continue to see that improve, that's what's most important, along with health. And
I think
like they're gonna have second place wrapped up in like a week. So
yeah, the health part is I think Casey is cognizant of that because he's been rotating rest for
sure.
Lowry, DeRozan, JB, off and on. So I think he gets it. I think he learned maybe last year that you can't just go gung ho on this. And the second spot is pretty much secured. I mean, there's no question about it. It's a question of first and eighth, and that's some of the questions that we got on Twitter. Is that you might have heard, Andrew, that we're 0-4 against the Bulls this year.
What?
Against an injured Bulls team every time. They haven't been full strength on any of those games. And right now we're one game behind of Cleveland. If we catch them, we could face the Bulls in the playoffs, who are currently seeded eighth. Like, where do you stand with that matchup? That's the one area of like kind of uneasiness around the team right now, is that they might, after going such a great season, you end up facing a team who's basically owned you. Like, are you of the belief that maybe over a 7-game series, it's a different outcome than what we saw in the regular season?
All right, so I'm going to argue for what I will call the Will Lou corollary here, which is that last year our esteemed colleague made an argument that we were much better to face the Washington Wizards because, based on the regular season, we had a dominant record against them compared to the Milwaukee Bucks, who we didn't do so well against. No need to bring up bad history because we all know how that panned out. I think that 4 games in the regular season is not necessarily the best indicator of how things will play out in a playoff series, which is very, very different. I also think that this Bulls team is dying a slow death. I think that there are things to look at and be concerned about as far as why they beat us and how they beat us, but I don't think we need to be afraid of the Bulls and afraid of them to the extent that we should worry about possibly pulling like the Brooklyn Nets from 2 years ago theory of trying to like tank games or win games based on trying to arrange seedings specifically to face or not face the Bulls. Like, whatever your fears are, like, rest assured, I do not think a 7-game playoff series against the Chicago Bulls is going to look like the 4-game regular season series. There's a lot of reasons for that. And the most important one is I don't think anyone in the Raptors approached any of these games against the Bulls like, we need to beat the Bulls, we need to prove something.
Yeah,
like,
I don't know about that one, though. I think the last 2 were approached that way. I think the
maybe.
last 2 were the chip on the shoulder kind of deal. I think they tried in that one, but they came up short. But overall, I agree with you. I think regular season is only so much of an indicator of playoff as we saw in the past. But looking at the standings right now, it's going to be one of Indiana, Chicago, or Detroit. It certainly looks that way, unless the Wizards make a big run, which I just don't see happening.
Yeah, or unless another team keeps falling or something. It's packed. Like that, the bottom of the Eastern Conference is going to be very difficult to predict where teams land.
So of those 3 teams, Detroit, Chicago, and the Pacers, like, who is the team that you would least want to face?
Detroit, Chicago, or the Pacers?
Yeah.
I would probably least favor the Pacers. Like, I think the Pacers are the best of those 3 teams. Matchup wise, I get like I can see the evidence for why Chicago has posed specific problems for us this year, but I've watched some of those games and like I still think it's weird that they can beat us. Like I haven't figured out why. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you know why Chicago can beat us? Like, have you figured that out? Do you feel confident in that?
I think they've just had like some unpredictable or like people you don't expect to go off on you go off. Like Doug McDermott went off twice on us.
Yeah,
Um,
do you
like
do
Etwan
you
Moore
watch those
basically
games and
owned
think that's
us.
who Chicago is, or that's who they will be against us, or do you think that like decent games that are like, if you're betting your life, do you really want, like, Chicago is 4-0 against us. If you're a Chicago fan and you have to bet your life, do you feel confident betting again on Chicago?
Like I can't possibly pick Doug McDermott to win a playoff series.
Like,
Let me put
no,
it that
thank
way.
you. I don't care how much
Yeah.
HGH is out there. I'm not saying he's done it. I'm just saying give him all of the HGH. And I'm still not betting on Dougie Buckets.
Yeah. And how Jimmy Butler comes back, how Derrick Rose comes, that's a big X factor. But it's just I don't want to
Yeah.
think about it. But do you think? I think you already answered this question. But in January, February, it's kind of hard to like look at the standings and go, oh, we should win, we should lose because of this. But at this point, where you kind of do, you can keep an eye on the seventh and eighth seed and kind of control your destiny depending on if you want to or not purposely lose, but rest players and so on, and kind of almost maneuver a playoff matchup for yourself here. Do you think the Raptors are like would ever think of doing that?
Like, I think that's proven risky. I think the team is going to care most of, like, from a front office perspective, I think they're going to care most about guys being healthy. From a coaching staff perspective, I think they're going to care most about having the team best prepared to play playoff games the way they want to play them.
Yeah.
And I think that the way that combines is for no one who's actually in charge of major decisions for the team giving an ish about who they play in the first round.
I had this thing where sometimes like even if you finish like with a really high seed like the Raptors are, you might get an unfavorable playoff matchup, and that almost seems counterintuitive to the regular season because you should be rewarded for having a good regular season and
Sure.
play the right. So one of the ideas I had, and I know this is never going to happen, but just think about this. Instead of like automatically facing 1-8-2-7, have the top two teams pick who they want to face. Give Cleveland top pick on who they'd rather face, the seventh or eighth seed, and the Raptors the other one.
Hmm.
Or
Yeah.
do it for the top three or something like that, where you actually create this drama by a team selecting their matchup. Because hypothetically or theoretically, you should be able the top seed should be favored, and the way it currently stands, it doesn't always work that way.
As a writer and especially as a internet person commentator on sports, I think that that's a tremendous idea. I would always be in favor
Butt
of
movers.
what's more silly and interesting. So here's my question for that. This year, at least, do you think that the Raptors and the Cavaliers disagree on which team they would rather face? Because I think that might actually be the case. So for example, like, if the Pistons are in eighth, I think the Cavaliers would rather not play the Pistons, and the Raptors would rather play the Pistons.
Well, I give Cleveland top pick, and then
Yeah,
we
yeah.
face the other
So
team.
like,
And
it,
however that works out, it works out. It doesn't really matter. I'm not saying about this season particularly, but overall, it would add a different level of intrigue to the last few games of the season.
yeah, I
I don't
don't,
know.
I don't think Cleveland wants to play Detroit. Like, look, eh, Cleveland is going to beat Detroit or whoever they play in the first round, but I think Cleveland would rather play, for example, Chicago than Detroit, and I think Toronto would much rather play Detroit than Cleveland.
No.
And that's like, it's a weird matchup thing, and maybe we're just putting too much attention into this, but
Right.
I don't know. Like, look. Last year, based on the regular season, Milwaukee looked like a more threatening team in some ways than Washington, and that was very much not the case.
Yeah, I don't think they ever looked more threatening than Washington.
No,
That's the
I
thing.
agree with
Yeah.
you than that, but you and I were arguing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
don't worry. Will hears about that every time he's on this podcast. We should talk quickly about the games that happened over the last couple of days. Orlando, obviously, it was a bit of Orlando's playing us tight. I think Evan Fournier is one of those guys that gives DeMar DeRozan a lot of trouble. He's basically the new Gerald Henderson, and who gives DeRozan the fits on the defensive end, and he kept him in the game. They had some Oladipo had a good game. Gordon had a good game. Basically, the Raptors' defense was susceptible for a majority of this game, and that kind of kept the magic in it. In the end, they got the calls, man. The Raptors, I think, went to the line like a ridiculous times in this game. Let me just check here. Uh, yeah, DeRozan was 13 of 16, Lowry 7 of 10. Overall, they went to the line 45 times and hit only 29. I saw the Magic feed on this game, and they were actually complaining openly about the calls that the Raptors were getting.
Look, I haven't watched a lot of opposing feeds for Raptors games over the last 2 years, but I suspect if you watch exclusively the opposing commentators' feeds, that is going to be the overwhelming narrative of commentary is that, like, look, the Raptors get to the line more than almost anyone for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And like, even cheering for this team, you watch it sometimes, and look, credit due where credit's due. Like, I think a lot of the top guys in the NBA get nonsense foul calls where like Lowry had a couple tonight where like a couple reach throughs and a couple shots where you're like, all right, I get that that's called a foul, but we all know that if someone tries to call that in pickup or something like that, you're like we're fighting. Like, that's not a foul. Like, you're a dick. But that's how they call it in the NBA. So be upset if you want to, but that's guys exploiting inefficiencies, and credit goes to them.
Yeah. Actually, really, we're kind of veering on the Raptor talk here because there's nothing much to talk about. The Raptors are good. I love this debate going on right now in the NBA where people are wondering like what to do to stop Steph Curry, and all the old timers are like, well, he wouldn't be doing this if there was hand checking, and there's this whole thing going on which people are trying to explain away his brilliance.
Yeah, like if you could threaten his parents with like some sort of murder, then you could just really deal with him. It's like, well, what? Like, how? What the hell are you like? Shut up! Like, okay, sure. Look, the guy is all-time great. I don't really know how this applies to what we're talking about, but
okay, let's not go down this. We might spend like 10 minutes.
Here's a question I have about this Orlando game today. Something I was thinking about during the game is, over the last couple of years, as the Raptors have become a much better team and a team that knows that they're probably better than most teams they play, and is a team that has an inordinate amount of Sunday home games just because of the scheduling. Have you noticed a tendency for the Raptors to, especially during Sunday afternoon games, which is a game that's maybe more difficult to get yourself hyped up for, or it just seems a little bit more lackadaisical, whatever. Whenever the Raptors play a team that they ought to beat on a Sunday afternoon, I always assume that it's going to come down to the end of the fourth quarter because they're just going to try and coast their way through it. And especially against a team like Orlando, which is full of young, plucky players who are, like playing hard and super athletic, I just assume that that's a game that's going to come down to it. Like, have you noticed this? Do you think this is a thing, or am I just reaching?
They don't call it a lazy Sunday for nothing. I think it's an earlier game. Players aren't like in their routine usually. And I think other teams know that the Raptors have this tendency, and they want to jump on them, and I think that it kind of works. And also the atmosphere on a Sunday is very different. You see a lot of kids at the games. It's not it's not the same crowd you might see on a Friday night where everybody's kind of pumped up. It's a lazy atmosphere on Sunday, and you saw like watching on TV today, it wasn't really that noisy. It was kind of like especially this game because it was like a 4:30 start. So it was even worse than the 6 p.m. start that usually you find. So I don't know. I've kind of gotten used to it. I remember that when the Raptors used to have those 12:30 games on Sunday, and those were always disappointing too because theoretically you would have an advantage there because you're playing on your home court. You're set up for this, and the other teams usually played a back-to-back the night before or something like that. But we always seem to be the one who get jumped on these. It's a trend that I've noticed too, but I can't be bothered to explain it.
No, it's a weird thing. When I had a brief stint as an NBA handicapper, and I used to just bet the crap out of whatever team would play the Knicks back when the Knicks were a very public team in the early Carmelo days. Whenever the Knicks would have a Sunday afternoon MSG game, I would just bet the crap out of whatever team they were playing because I would assume that the Knicks would not get that up for a game where they thought they were great and they really weren't that great, and it was a Sunday afternoon game. And whatever team was playing them, it was like, hey, this is a TV game, and we're in New York. Let's show up. This matters to us, and it wouldn't matter that much to them. It's one of those things where it's not a logical thing, and it's really hard to reach for stats. It's logical, but you can't make like an analytical argument for it. You have to make like a weird, real life, intangible argument for why you think this is a thing. But I made money on that.
I read the Jason Williams book a couple days ago. I finished Loose Balls, and I've been reading 7 Seconds or Less, which I probably should have read by now. and players actually make it a point to play for Madison Square at
For
Madison Square
sure.
Garden.
That's the
It's
thing.
something they circle on their calendars, like when the schedule comes out, and they want to perform there. So the Knicks are at actually a disadvantage whenever they mess with the schedule because the other team's always going to be up for it, and when they're starting at an odd time, they're especially going to be up for it.
Yeah, that's just kind of the way it went to work.
Yeah.
It's and like Rajon Rondo in TV games, like people used to laugh at Bill Simmons, like that was a real thing. Speaking as a former handicapper, like that was a legitimate thing. That just like players give craps about weird things,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things they get up for.
Did you watch the Celtics game?
I did.
Yeah. Surprisingly poor start by the Celtics. They have been struggling. I think that they had lost four straight before beating Philadelphia. Interesting stat in this game: Luis Scola had 17 first quarter points, and the Celtics had 14.
Yeah.
And they never kind of really dug themselves out of that hole. And the Raptors ended up winning it comfortably. I think it was a blowout in the end. The fourth quarter wasn't even a contest. This was supposed to be one of those. Hey, let's see, if there's a real threat below us in the East, and the Celtics were the kind of the best offer, and nothing really happened here.
No, the Celtics. That was a slow fart of a game
Yeah.
for the Celtics. Like the minutes, Stevens is sometimes, I think he deserves credit for spreading the minutes amongst different guys and really expanding the bench and getting a full amount of energy from guys. And sometimes you can tell that he's kind of trying to do like a card trick, if you will, and just trying to get production from whoever he can. And he has his advantage is that he has 10 guys that aren't great, but that can all play. So he just kind of rotates through, seeing who has it. And man, no one really had it.
Yeah, and they have a scoring issue on that team. They're very they go into like offensive droughts way too frequently for them to be considered a real like a threat in the playoffs. I think the defense can carry you so far, but they just like Evan Turner is not a consistent player. Like he goes through especially Marcus Smart is off and on. Kelly Olynyk had a awesome January, but he's kind of fallen off. And Amir Johnson. So they don't really have that offensive punch, that consistent offensive punch that would scare you in any sort of way.
No.
And you saw that in the first quarter where they were missing shots and they really couldn't get going at all till really the third quarter they had a decent stint, but that was about it.
Yeah, like if
and
you
also,
can,
sorry, the Celtics are a team that are kind of better than they're supposed to be right now, given their like
for sure.
franchise trajectory. So they don't even feel too bad about it. Like I think if they finish fourth and they get knocked out of the first round of the playoffs, it would be considered a huge step for the franchise.
Yeah, like this is a team of pieces. They don't have a guy. Like Isaiah Thomas has been better than anyone thought he would be this year. Like he's continually gotten better, and he's always been undervalued because of his size. Like for reasons that make sense. Like a score first, undersized point guard. You cannot build your franchise around that guy, and he's just been better than expected continually. But like you can't rely on that kind of a guy to bail you out. You can't have, like you can't play five guys where you don't have a real center and you don't have a real small forward at times. Like Jay Crowder didn't play in that game, I don't think, and that makes a big difference for them because he really expands their shooting, but more importantly their size. Like they basically play two power forwards and 2 or 3 point guards sometimes,
Yeah.
and if you're not hitting difficult shots over people, you're going to get beat down with that kind of a lineup.
And this team, essentially the Celtics, that is, are really lining up for a big trade. I think they got a bunch of picks there. They got some good young players here. Danny Ainge, you just know, is itching to make that blockbuster move where he gets a legit number one guy to Boston. So I think what you're seeing today, the Celtics are going to look very different in I'd say even after the summer if Danny Ainge gets his way.
Yeah, they're going to make a big move on someone in free. They're going to try and make moves on guys in free agency. We're seeing tons of Kevin Durant noise. Like, good luck, but they're poised to have cap space and lottery picks, and a developing young core, and like they're in a position to succeed. It doesn't mean they will succeed because they need to either and hit on those picks and sign someone in free agency in order to be relevant, but.
Yeah, and
they could, but they might not necessarily.
Yeah, and the Raptors Weekly Extra podcast already covered the Indiana game, but we should just briefly talk about it. Bismack Biyombo, I recall, had a pretty big game here. I think he was 16 points and 25 rebounds. Has that a personal franchise record? I think franchise record and personal record. Just talk about Biombo for a moment here. Obviously, like we used to have this Bismack Biombo blown bunny counter where we kind of made fun of how many gimmies he blew, and we had to take it down because the fans were getting on us.
Hit hard.
And he's been finishing over at like a 60% clip of late. 6 of 11 in this game. So it's or 5 for 6 from the floor, 6 of 11 from the free throw line, 25 rebounds. Monster game here against a good rebounder in Hill.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things going on there. Like, first off, like you can't hate hard on a team that's succeeding as well as the Raptors are. Like, that's sure, fair enough. I don't think Biombo has turned into a reliable finisher down low. I think that at times he plays and you think to yourself, like, wow, like maybe we're okay. Maybe we should be playing him more minutes. And at other times it's like, this is why Biombo shouldn't be a starting piece that you need to rely on. A lot of his improved field goal percentage, not a lot. I'd say I don't know how the breakdown happens, but it's somewhere between 60-40 between he's improved maybe 40% and 60% is, look, the league has figured out just how well Lowry is scoring and destroying teams and just how much DeRozan is tearing people apart. And he's getting a lot of really easy baskets because of those guys just demanding the attention from scouting reports. But also, both of those guys in Lowry and DeRozan have gotten a lot better at finding the open man when they do drive to the basket. And he's reaping those awards. And, like, let's not give Biombo credit for actually improving. Like, I think Casey and whoever else gets a chance to talk in post games is always talking about how Biombo practices that shot in practice, so we want to let him take it in games. And I think that has two effects. That's A, reflective of the fact that I think he has actually been working that hard, and B, that the coaching staff wants Biombo to know that they believe in him, so maybe he's thinking about it less. Like, who knows how the breakdown of confidence works? I know confidence really affects your shot. I don't know how much of that comes from you believing in other people, but I think we're seeing that. I think that's why he's improved.
Well, I think there is a confidence factor here because I think there's a stat last year, I remember, where he didn't make a single field goal from outside the painted area. And this year he's actually hitting little short turnaround jumpers on the baseline, which actually go in. And his shooting motion doesn't look horrendous. It looks okay. And I also think that he has in Charlotte, I'm not sure how many actual numbers were called for him. In Toronto, he is actually I don't know if the planned recipient or unplanned recipient, but they actually look for him when he rolls to the rim. So I think confidence plays a big part in how well he's done. But what impressed me in this game, man, was that the Raptors played 9 guys, the Pacers played 12, and we held Paul George to 7 of 24, Monta Ellis to 3 for 11, and a lot of credit to the long arms of Norman Powell and also Corey Joseph's tenacity there against George Hill and switching up top. And the Raptors did a lot of switching in this game, and George saw a lot of different looks. It wasn't just DeRozan on him. Overall, a very, very effective game. And also Dwayne Casey kind of smartened up and didn't leave Luis Scola out there for too long when he knew that he was getting lit up a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Holding Paul George this season to 1 for 9 from 3 and 7 of 24 is really difficult. Holding Monta Ellis to 3 of 11 is actually pretty standard, but the Paul George is like that's tough. Like, they asked some guys who maybe wouldn't normally have to guard someone like that to lock him down, and whether or not shots just didn't go in or they challenged them well, like that, it seemed like they decided that it was more important to have a tenacious defender on him than a guy that can match him up size-wise. And I don't know if that was scouting report. I don't know if that was just trust, but it panned out. And I think regardless, we're seeing a team that's clicking on a lot of different levels cohesively.
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll take some Twitter questions and talk about DeMario Carroll and a bunch of other topics.
Get Goldfinger today.
Here's a scenario.
You've been injured in a serious accident. The doctor says your recovery could take months, maybe even years, yet your insurance company is denying your claim every step of the way. If something like this happens to you, call me, Brian Goldfinger of Goldfinger Personal Injury Law. We have offices in Toronto, London, Peterborough, and now Kitchener-Waterloo. Visit goldfingerlaw.com and get us working for you.
Welcome back to part 2 of the Rapcast. Andrew is here after a long hiatus. So what was the most interesting country you went to, Andrew?
I guess it depends on whether or not you consider interesting things going really well or things going really bad.
Memorable, let's put it that way.
Memorable? Probably Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
I spent almost 3 weeks in Vietnam, and that was a very interesting, different place to spend a lot of time in. I liked it.
What happened there, man? Did you meet a lady boy? Would you call Charlie? What's going on?
No. The lady boy is Thailand, man. Lady boy is Thailand. That's a whole different thing.
Is it Thailand or Thailand? I never got that one.
It's Thailand. It's Thailand and it's Thompson. So we'll bring that up again. Vietnam is different. So I was there for Tet, which is if you're not from Vietnam or haven't spent time there, that's the Lunar New Year. And if you are from Vietnam, you know why it was a little unfortunate for me to be there during Tet. I didn't realize that was like a week-plus long time when the country essentially shuts down. So that affected my trip in a pretty big way. But Vietnam was a very interesting place. It's like some of the major cities there, like especially Hanoi, where I dropped into, it's like you're not ready for the fact that like the old downtown area of Hanoi is just like it's like an ant's nest on cocaine, where you walk outside the street and there's just hundreds of motorbikes everywhere obeying no traffic laws because they don't exist, and you have to cross the street and you don't know what's going on. So
it's like a game of Frogger with like your life at stake.
Pretty much, yeah. And so like I'm not a freakishly tall guy, but I'm fairly tall. But I have freakishly large feet, so I have like size either 13 or 14 U.S. Feet, and my shoes were stolen in Thailand right before I flew to Hanoi. So I just had flip-flops to wear, and when I landed in Hanoi, it was about 11 degrees Celsius, and that is way too cold to not have shoes for. And I tried to buy shoes. And it turns out that if you're looking for size 13 or 14 U.S. shoes in Hanoi, my shoe size in Vietnamese is called because they do not have my shoe size.
Well, you gotta buy 2 shoes and stitch them together. That's how it works there.
Yeah, pretty much. You just have to buy like a rip-off pair of shoes, a couple sizes too small, that's in stretchy material that you can just sort of bind your feet into. So yeah, different experience.
Right. That was it.
That's it.
All right. Twitter questions.
Yeah.
First question comes from sbruce47. There might be an underscore after it. I don't know. Can't tell.
Who cares?
He goes.
Sorry.
Any news on the return of DeMaria Carroll? Any thoughts to the adjustment to the lineup when he comes back? So, essentially, the general belief here is that he might come back after our short upcoming 3-game road trip, which would give him about 10 games to play in the season, and you could probably rest him on back-to-backs and do a bunch of other things to kind of ease him in. Basically, he might get 6 or 7 games in the best case for the before the playoffs start. Andrew, what do you do with him?
You integrate him back into the team scheme. Like I don't think you. I think, look, he's a veteran and he's a big piece. I think all you're worried about doing is trying to get him into like conditioning game shape without aggravating any kind of an injury, without escalating it too much, and making sure that he sort of knows the rotations and the ball movement, offense, defense. And I don't think you care what his numbers look like going into the playoffs. You just want him to be healthy and as fit as possible and knowing what to do. And I think that's it. Like, I don't care if he plays 15, 20 minutes, whether he gets 10, 12, 5 points. Like, do you have like a barometer numbers-wise, or do you just want to see him look okay?
Yeah, I don't think he's not one of those guys that should be difficult to integrate. I think he understands that when he comes in, he's not going to be, we're not going to go to him for his offense. I think he understands that. He's not a guy who's going to come in here to prove his offensive way through. He'll probably take away minutes from Norman Powell and James Johnson, which is totally fine.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's if you just make that
and even
switch
Scola.
right now. or even Scola, and I think that's totally fine. I don't think you're gonna miss anything there. So I don't think he's gonna be a hard guy to integrate back. I just hope that he's fully healthy. I
Sure.
just don't want him coming back again at 80% because when he's in that flux mode, is he healthy? Is he not healthy? That's when he kind of hurts the team. But I'm guessing being out for so long, you're not gonna bring him back when he's 100%.
No,
Or
I
at
feel
least
like
the
I
Raptors
remember.
shouldn't bring him back just for the pressure of the playoffs because he's their marquee signing.
No, I think they know that. And I think that's why we haven't seen him back yet. And I mean, to contribute to that, I think I seem to remember hearing interviews. And are you dying? Zorar is dying, guys. Let's hold on. Let's give him a break here.
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah. All right. I feel like I remember reading about Damari talking about getting hurt right near the start of the season and trying to play through it because he felt like a need to live up to the contract, but more importantly, like he felt that he had this role on the team that he had to try to live up to. So he was taking a lot of shots when he didn't feel like he was maybe ready for it, or he was trying to play through pain and prove something. And I think that one advantage might be at this point of the season where the team has done so well without him that I don't think he feels that obligation anymore. I think that if anything, he's going to try to come back and not mess things up. And I think that's a really great place for an important but still a role playing contributing veteran to sort of slide into, where he's going to want to try and do the little things. He's not going to want to try to take over. He's not going to do too much. I think this is Damari Carroll that's ready to stay in his lane. And if he can get his athleticism and his shot back, I think that really boosts this team.
Yeah, I think you got a point on the pressure thing because you can't be hashtagging everything on Instagram as Junkyard Dog 2.0 and then missing a game because your foot hurts kind of a little bit. I think that kind of got to him. So I'm glad they got the rest of him. Let's see how it goes. I don't think it's a big problem here. Let's move on to the next question. It's from King Size. Size is with a Y.
Shoes.
Size is with a Y, though. That's nice. I goes, should Dwayne Casey be a serious contender for Coach of the Year? So I'm going to look at it this two ways. Is he a Coach of the Year from a regular season perspective with the NBA votes? Yeah, I mean, why not? I mean, I think he's had to integrate like three new guys. The team's going to like crack like 55 wins probably. Why not? From my perspective, I'm like, for my Coach of the Year, I want to see him perform in the playoffs, see how he does there, and then pass judgment on Dwayne Casey. So it's like it's a mixed question.
Yeah, look, the award is voted on before playoffs, so I think that we need to look at it that way. Like, I agree with you as far as judging a coach in general, but correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a regular season award that is voted on before, or at least if it's not voted on before playoffs start, they are only supposed to consider regular season contributions.
Yeah. So Luke Walton then.
Yeah, exactly, Luke Walton. I think there's two schools of thought here. I think there's the Zach Lowe school of thought, which is that Greg Popovich should win this award every year because it's really difficult to argue that he's not the best coach of the year. And once again, that seems to be the overwhelming, like clear point. But I think the way that the media and the coaches that vote for this is that you look at what coach did more than you thought they were going to do. And looking back on last year, we already talked about it in this podcast, like, we were kind of thinking, like, look, I don't know why we're bringing Dwayne Casey back. And he has done far greater than our expectations were, and that was without one of the team's most important players for almost the entire season. He's improved on his faults. He has grown in ways we didn't think he would, and this team has thrived beyond anyone's expectations. So I think if you want to base it on how they usually give out this award, I think he's technically the one most viable for it in a season where Steve Kerr wasn't around for most of the year. And that they're just tired of giving it out to Popovich because they don't like to give the same award out to the same guy every year. So I think he's the front runner, to be honest with you.
Yeah, he might be. And like, I want to give a dark horse shout out to Eric Spoelstra, who's had to deal with new players coming in, with Luol Deng and also James.
Luol Deng's been there for like 2 years.
Oh, sorry.
You mean Joe Johnson?
Joe Johnson coming in, but dealing with the Chris Bosh situation, the Wade injuries. I think he's done well there. I think the Chalmers trade had a big impact on them. Goran Dragic, first year full time. I think all these things kind of. Miami only 40-29, but I think he's done overall a decent job, and I think that they look a threat, man. So I think Dwayne Casey's definitely ahead of him in the pecking order, but I don't know. I think he's done a decent job. But yeah, why not give it to Dwayne Casey? I think I think given how low he was in the summer and how high he is riding right now, I think just, if you look at that delta alone, you might make a case there.
Yeah, like look, if you want to give it if you want to award it as a co-winner to to Luke Walton and Steve Kerr or to Popovich, then you're an idiot if you say they don't deserve it because they're both doing historical things. But if you want to go outside of that and go the way they traditionally awarded, I don't see how Dwayne Casey is not the most.
This is one of those awards
candidate.
that actually a lot of coaches don't like receiving because it puts like a spotlight on them.
It's and I think because of the way that we just described it too, where it so rarely actually goes to the best coach in the NBA and goes to the coach in the NBA that just did the most surprising job, and because that's so difficult to maintain year to year, it usually spells doom because most of those coaches end up getting fired within a year or two because usually it's the case of overachieving. I don't think that's the case with the Raptors, but
we thought you sucked, but you didn't. Here's an award.
They didn't. And then so next year, if you don't get even better than that, it's like, oh, you do suck, fuck you, and you get fired. So.
All right, okay, let's rush through these Twitter questions. We're it's like what time is it? It's 1:45 in the morning, man. We gotta get going. This one comes from Seventh Greek Geek. I'm not gonna bother with this anyway. So it goes. Did the Raptors offer Bennett the option to join the 905? What is he up to these days, anyways? He's up to nothing. He's just hanging around, deciding what he wants to do next in his basketball career. There was no official offer made by the Raptors to the to Bennett, at least not one that was public. I mean, would he? I think we talked about him on the last podcast. Is that if the Raptors do offer him a D-League contract and he goes and plays for the 905, there are still like a bunch of D-League guys who are well ahead of him in terms of making it to the NBA. I think his best bet really is to go to Europe and get some professional experience playing in a competitive league, and then come back in 2 to 3 years and see where he fits. Because he's only like 22 or something like that, 23. So he's got time on his side, and I don't think staying at the 905 actually helps him. The Raptors might offer him a contract just for, from an entertainment standpoint, from a PR standpoint, from a sell some ticket standpoint, but I don't think it actually helps Bennett.
No, like he doesn't have it, and look. It's as much a mental as a physical thing. Like, he obviously had it physically at one point, but he just doesn't mentally. So I don't think a guy like that is ever going to reclaim it, if he ever did have it, without just being forced to change fundamentally. So if he's ever going to get it, he's not going to get it without being forced to hit rock bottom. So he's got to go for his own sake. And look, for the Raptors' sake, like, look, if this guy wasn't Canadian, would you give a shit? Like, would you in any way make the argument that he deserves a chance? You would not. So it's sentimental. So, like, no, the 905 shouldn't sign him because he's not good enough to justify either like a roster spot or like this guy could be something chance. So for his own sake and because you got to look out for the team, he's gone, and that's too bad. But that's how it goes.
All right, I got the next question. It goes, how many games? This is from @AcePackStar. And he goes, how many games to win till they clinch a playoff spot? I believe the magic number is 1. I think tomorrow if Detroit loses.
Yeah.
They win, so I don't know why it matters, but there you go. Next question is from @F3Jimbo1. He asks, should Casey
try again? Just make a new Twitter account.
That's exactly what it is. The number 3, JIMBO1. F3Jimbo1. It wasn't that hard, actually.
All right. F3Jimbo1.
Jimbo goes, should Casey try to bring JV off of the bench? And he's coming from the thought that Bismack Biyombo is doing so well in the starting lineup. And related question from Seventh Greek was, now that Scola and Bismack are a good combination, shouldn't we just think of pairing JV with Patterson? And I'm like, why do you want to mess with things? I really don't think in today's NBA at all it really matters who starts. It depends on what the opposing matchup is, and you adjust accordingly. If you're playing the Atlanta Hawks, you might want to have JV in there because you want to battle on the glass and you want to get that size in there, and that's what they did last time. If you're playing a team like the Magic, you might want to have Biyombo in there. I don't know. To me, this whole starting bench, it really doesn't matter.
Sure. So one of my arguments from day one as a commentator has just been a basket scored in the second quarter is worth the same as a basket scored in the first quarter, and people are across the board far too obsessed about who starts, who doesn't, and what that means, because you want to put together the most efficient team possible in all ways possible. And I think that what we've seen so far is that speed and the ability to recover on defense has been a big part of why our bench unit has been so effective all year. And I think Valanciunas compromises that a little bit as far as what the bench unit can offer, while he's able to bring rebounding and some other things to the starting unit, where the starting unit doesn't need that kind of versatility defensively because they can make up for things. I think he is more valuable in the starting lineup, but I think regardless, it shouldn't matter. Like it's whatever you can find works the best for the team, and who starts or who doesn't start. Like almost every single team in the NBA would be so much better off if we as a collective whole stopped giving an ish who started and who didn't, and they could just play the most efficient lineups possible for different parts of the game. And so many teams are beholden to that, and it's problematic to them, and I don't think we should care whether Biyombo starts or Valanciunas starts, because it doesn't mean one's better than the other or more important than the other. I think we should just look at what lineup balances best. And like you, I agree that I think Biyombo sometimes plays with the starters when that seems to be a more reflexive lineup against who they play. And if they play a team like Atlanta, then yeah, Valanciunas is more reflexively beneficial to the starting lineup, so let's give him the majority of minutes. Like there's no reason to be beholden to one or the other.
Yeah, I mean, Valanciunas had some massive games against against the Heat and against the Hawks, where he was immense in them. Like he went up against Hassan Whiteside and held him in check and had I think 11 boards in that game. Against the Hawks, he was guarding Horford in the block and did extremely well. So even this sometimes there's this narrative that he's not a good defensive player or he's immobile. He is in certain cases, but he also brings a lot on the defensive side, which we just don't talk about enough. He's not as flashy as Biyombo on defense, so maybe he doesn't get noticed as much. But his footwork, his positioning has been like I'd say 8 out of 10 over the last month in terms of just defense.
Yeah, like he's a physically dominant player in a way that happens slowly, so you don't appreciate it. You just realize that he's turning and making his shot a foot and a half away from the basket. And you're like, oh, look, I guess that went in. Like, that looked easy. It's like, yeah, it was easy. And it's really hard for a guy to get positioned that close to the basket and turn and face and get his shot unchallenged from that point and then grab an offensive rebound. So, I think Valanciunas is a guy that is valued more in front offices across the league, from what I've read, than he is by fan bases across the league. He's not a dominant NBA player, but he is much more valuable than I think many Raptors fans appreciate.
Yeah. Here's a question from Jordan J. Wilbur, and he goes, "Can we get Amir back in the off season?" I think he's coming from a sentimental place, not a rational thought place.
I think there's two things. Like money wise, no. Like we're not like that's like I respect it. I think the team knew that Amir was leaving because the other places would offer him more money than they wanted to give him. And like Amir hasn't been as good this year as he was 2 years ago or 3 years ago or 4 years ago. Like he can do things, and like there I got my spot with RR by just being an unabashed Amir Johnson fan and just writing about him. So like I love Amir, but he's not as good as he was. He's not as dynamic as he was. And as a guy who is a help defender, as a power forward playing center, most importantly, who relies on that, he's going to become less and less valuable every year. And I adore him, but why do you need him?
I mean, just ask yourself this question. I mean, even and if you just compare Amir to someone like Scola right now, given the way the two are playing, yeah, he's for him for the Celtics and him for the Raptors. Scola's playing much better basketball overall, even though he's been poor defensively for the majority of the season. Like he's adding a bit of graft and niftiness to the offense that Amir didn't have. And Amir was a great pick and roll player with Calderon for a couple of years, which I think we all have fond memories of that, and sometimes I think we get nostalgic about that. But at the end of the day, those were not great teams, and his offensive game was quite limited. Where Scola, even if you like throw him a ball in the block once in a while or he gets a rebound, he has enough in there where he can finish, or he even runs the break as we talked about earlier. So I just don't see why, even if you compare him to someone like Scola who's been struggling, he doesn't beat him. So I don't know why you would go and spend extra money to get Amir Johnson next year. Maybe talk about potentially retiring his jersey sometime down the road, but I think that's about it.
No, like if Amir Johnson was to have a value with the Raptors, it would be in replacing Biyombo, not in replacing Scola. Like we do not need him to play power forward for this team. There's where the NBA is now. Like at power forward, you need a guy who the only reason why Scola is with the starting unit is because he's developed a 3-point shot. Like that is a big part of what he can do. He plays an offensively dynamic role. And Amir Johnson is a pick-and-roll player as a roll man. He's a putback guy who is an above-average scorer as far as percentage goes in putting back offensive rebounds and in cleaning up the glass and in being a help defender, which is most valuable from the center position. We don't have a spot for him to be a backup center or a starting center. So the reality is he doesn't serve a value to this team. And again, like, look, we love the guy, but he's barely playing for Boston. Like, there are games when he plays 5 minutes for Boston who we're better than. So what, like, and who doesn't have a real center.
And one thing that, in his last couple of years with the Raptors, his last 3-4 years with the Raptors, he was developing that three a little bit. And he was shooting that at, 1-3 a game or so. And in his last year with the Raptors, he shot that at 41%. He only took 0.6 a game, but still it was something. And this year, that aspect of his game has kind of gone away, where he's shooting 22% from three right now, and he's still taking the same amount as last year. So it's he's taken a step back offensively from every standpoint, and I why? He's playing 22 minutes a game. I just don't, other than nostalgic reasons, just don't get it. Final question is from at Rapsfeed. And he goes, I think we talked about this already, man. Should the Raptors try to stay away from the first seed if it means playing the Bulls, or can we beat them? I think we talked about this already. I think we can beat the Bulls because I don't believe in Doug McDermott, and I think the Bulls are kind of unhealthy. And in a 7-game series, I think it's going to be a different story, I'd say.
And look, just look at the broader picture here. It's like playing chess. See the board, see the whole board. Are you more concerned if your whole obsession is the Bulls in the first round, then go for it. But that means that you ultimately don't think you have the long game in you. If you think you have the long game in you, which I think if you look at the Eastern Conference this year, I don't think the Raptors are a better team than the Cavaliers are capable of being, but that's how you have to play this. Realistically, you have to play that this way. You're the 2 seed. You're the 2 seed by a lot. You need to play the long game. And the long game means you're concerned about Cleveland. You're not concerned about Chicago. If you're concerned about Cleveland, is it more valuable for you to have home court against Cleveland than it is for you to play Detroit against Chicago? It's way more valuable to have home court against Cleveland. So that's what you would choose. And regardless, it's not happening. But still, that look at see the whole board. That's my point.
I was just thinking, can we catch Cleveland? And I'm looking at the Cavaliers' schedule, and they have. Would you call Houston a tough game at home? No.
No.
Atlanta away, they got, which is a potential loss, and then they have Chicago away, and then Atlanta away again, and then Detroit. So let's call 4 kind of tough games for them. And for the Raptors,
and keep in mind too that Cleveland is especially since Tyronn Lue came, I still don't think they know who they are since Tyronn Lue took over. So that's a team that's still trying to figure out what's going on there. They're not looking at punting games for rest in the playoffs yet.
Exactly. So assuming they all want to play, the Raptors they got Boston away, which is tough. Houston away, which is, I guess Cleveland has that. So 2 games. Then you got Oklahoma City, that's tough. Atlanta twice, that's 5 games. Yeah. So I'd say, and then they got San Antonio. So I think the Raptors have about 2 to 3 more tough games than Cleveland for the rest of the way. So that elusive first seed is probably not going to happen. So settle in for number 2 and settle in for the Bulls, Pacers, or what was it, Detroit?
Yeah. Don't look maybe I'll look like an idiot, but don't fear the Bulls because of 0-4. There is something to that matchup. There's something that they've figured out, or there's something that we're trying too hard, or whatever it is. But I really have a hard time thinking that that's indicative of a much larger sample size that we can't overcome.
Andrew, I think with that we got to wrap it up.
Let's do it. That's enough.
Let's wrap it up. Do check out the Raptors Weekly Extra podcast, which airs on Friday with Blake and Will, and rate us on iTunes and Stitcher and Acast and whatever your mobile phone app is. And if you want to support Raptors Republic, go to patreon.com/RaptorsRepublic. We'll be back next week with another podcast. Andrew, man, thanks for joining and taking the time out. I know you just finished a 18-hour shift somewhere.
Something like that, yeah. It was great to be back. I love talking with you. It's good to chat with you again, Zara.
All right.
You remain the people's champ.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again next week. Goodbye.